I think it's best in life to build people, not things.
Hello. Hello. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, founder and podcast producer at MaxPodcasting. And you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode number 1776, if you ignore the second digit or the third digit. And today's guest is Matt Radicelli. Matt is the founder of Rock the House, the DJ / entertainment / party rock in the house group that has been an absolute empire in the Cleveland and beyond area going back since 1999. Matt grew the business from nothing to doing over 1,500 events a year. And we talk about all those things as well as how Matt is advising other entrepreneurs these days as the business handyman. It is Matt Radicelli of RTH Group. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Matt Radicelli, I'll call you the king of Cleveland bar and bat mitzvahs and events and weddings and everything. If you're a kid like me who grew up in the 90s and early 2000s in the Cleveland area, it was hard not to go to a party without Rock the House being the life of the party. So this is really cool. And now you've kind of, in addition to that, have pivoted to the business coaching space as well. So we'll get to your life as the business handyman. But Matt, this is super surreal. Thanks for joining today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Max. And I got to tell you, it's been a long time since somebody called me the king of bar and bat mitzvahs, man. So thanks for the throwback.
Of course. I mean, I don't know what the percentages are, but I swear it felt like 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the parties that I went to around that age were Rock the House. And I got to say, you were very hands-on. You were kind of leading the party at a lot of them, but the ones you couldn't make it, your team filled in and did fantastic as well. So I think so many kids in my age especially have a bunch of different color Rock the House or RTH shirts.
Well, I just want to thank all the parents out there for putting all of my kids through college, through all of those bar and bat mitzvahs. So yeah.
Exactly. That's really the secret. That's what's going on there. But we're going to get into the RTH story. We're going to get into your coaching business. But before that, what was the first ever show that you DJ'd or MC'd?
Well, if you want to call it a show, the first thing I ever did where I was performing with, 2 turntables and a microphone and really what was a cassette deck would have been a nightclub called Kicks in Streetsboro, Ohio. And my mom and dad worked at the nightclub. My mom was the controller and a bartender. My dad was the DJ. So that was the first time I ever got to perform in front of a crowd, believe it or not.
And how old were you at that time?
7 years old.
Oh my God. So
yeah.
So you're kind of thrown into the fire of those things. And I didn't even mean to ask you about show. I meant to ask you about like event, but I'm going to roll with show anyway. But what was it like at that age?
Yeah, it's like happenstance. It didn't, nobody forced me into it, but they sort of had me at the club after hours because a babysitter wasn't in the cards for them at the time. So after school, I would come and do my homework in the corner. And then bit by bit, I just started picking stuff up that my dad was doing. And that led into, the other part of your question. I started doing shows after my parents divorced when I was like 12 or 13. I started doing shows for pay that were teen club based, which, you and your friends also know quite a bit about from the late 90s and 2000s. And so like there's just tons of school dances, teen clubs. I was even doing weddings when I was young because people thought it was a novelty to have such a young DJ do the wedding. And yeah, lots of stuff like that.
Such a hip wedding.
I guess. Yeah.
Which of those events, whether it be bar mitzvahs, weddings, corporate events, school events, which of those were your favorite to actually be a part of in the moment?
It was always an evolution. So if you would have asked me when I was 15 or 16, 17, I would have told you that I had evolved from nightclubs because I did clubs oddly until I was 17 or 18. And then I basically tapped out. I had been doing nightclubs for almost 10 years, which is so weird to say now. So then it evolved into me being an event promoter, and the events that I was throwing were my events. So, it was like, tons of people lined up out the door paying $10 or more to get in. And it was our job to throw a real event that made people want to come back again next week and pay $10 again. The next evolution of that was overproducing high school dances, making them bigger and better than they were the year before. And then that sort of led into the catalyst of Ryan Konikoff, one of my best friends and partner, and now the majority owner of Rock the House. His grandfather called up one day and said, "Hey, I need a DJ for a bar bat mitzvah." It was a bat mitzvah. And I said, yes, and that was basically the rest is history moment. But it was an evolution of what was my favorite or what was the most challenging or the most fulfilling at the time, right? It always changed because once you reach that high, you can never get there again. And you have to say kind of what's next. And that's how it was every step of the way.
And it's one thing to get started, even at an early age, but what was the moment for you that it clicked that, and I'm pretty good at putting on these productions?
It was right around 1999. I had been out of high school for about 2 years, and I decided not to go to college because I had a couple businesses. The teen events and the DJing side was doing well, but I was making good money doing audiovisual installations for local restaurants that were in the entertainment space. If you remember in our region, Champs Americana and Damon's.
Yeah. Champs with 2 P's.
Yeah. So I used to do all the installation and service work for Champs and Damon's within our region.
Oh, just a quick aside for those who aren't familiar. Damon's was like the trivia palace. It had like a bunch of big screens and like TV everywhere. I remember those, and Champs had like giant TV screens and lights and everything. A great place to watch games. It just, both of them were very social, fun place to go out.
That's right. So, you imagine it sort of clicked. I understood what they were looking for in the entertainment space. And I was also very technical. So I was servicing sound systems and video systems and microphones at the host stand and all that stuff. And just getting paid really well as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old, hourly, just doing really great. And then that bat mitzvah happened. And then the next one happened and the next one. So when you say, when did you realize? It wasn't long after that I said, the heck with this other AV stuff. I can still do my teen events on Fridays and Sundays, but I can capitalize on bar and bat mitzvahs. And I'll tell you, man, there was no turning back. We said flat out, and I say we because there was a lot of my friends around at the time too. What? So there's this market out there where I can charge double what I charge for other events, and all people expect is great service. I can do that.
Yeah.
And that's it. Period.
That it doesn't hurt from the business sense.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because traditionally a bar bat mitzvah is, they say, like when a boy becomes a man or when a girl becomes a woman, or kind of coming of age in the Jewish world. And for you, it was a bat mitzvah that helped you become a businessman. So real special moment there. So let's get to Rock the House, or I still have the chance in my head, RTH Group. I think you got all the kids to say that a couple times over the years. RTH, Rock the House, really created, we'll call it a DJ and MC and production empire across Cleveland, greater Cleveland. How far what's the widest you expanded beyond like the main Cleveland area, by the way?
It's reasonable to say that annually we were doing shows as far as Pittsburgh and Chicago and Cincinnati, frequently. So, we were in Columbus or one of those other cities almost every other week. But most of the business that we did was in Northeast Ohio.
Very cool. Well, we won't talk about Pittsburgh, but all those other cities pretty cool. When did you officially file the papers and get everything started and officially start Rock the House?
1999, we incorporated.
And what changed in that moment from your strategy of how you had been doing events to, okay, here's what things are going to look like going forward?
I think it was the first time I was introduced to intent and intention, being deliberate about a business action. Everything else just sort of happened. We both know business owners and people that are out there that have lightning in a bottle, and demand just sort of happens, and therefore they have to produce the supply. That's what was happening up until that moment where we decided to make it an intentional move for this to be a company, a real company. And we just had to learn every step of the way, but that's pretty much it. The supply and demand were in the right positioning. Yeah, man, it's great thinking about it. Now it's amazing because, I sort of wish I knew then what I know now. I'm pretty sure we could have scaled it even faster than we did, which is insane to think about. But
you talk about supply and demand. What was demand like for you at the start?
A lot of what I do for coaching and consulting now is to get people to realize that we need to work on the things we have in front of us before we try and do new shiny things. And it's really easy to use DJing in 1999 as an example, because a lot of people want to do what's called in the industry a multi-op, where there's one guy that comes out. You probably remember Terry Macklin.
Of course. Yeah. Club Max.
I want to just make it very clear. Terry is the king of Cleveland bar and bat mitzvahs, and he will hold that title forever, in my opinion. And basically, if the guy that's at the top has overflow, then everybody else gets work. And your hope and your goal is to make sure that they're doing, as you mentioned earlier, as good a job or better as the one that you saw at the first show. Well, in our situation, we had such a great team so early on that the phone was ringing off the hook with zero advertising. And, we're talking double-digit growth year over year, which is really fun. Double-digit growth every year for 20 years.
That's a great business model.
Yeah. It's lightning in a bottle. But what was growth like early on? It was natural. For businesses that don't have to fight tooth and nail for leads or for closing percentages, that's what it feels like. You're making so much money hand over fist that you're not so worried about making a budget or being responsible or whatever. We were just doing great shows and pumping capital right back into the business to make the shows even better.
So if you're not spending money on advertising, what do you think is the secret for people actually coming your way and discovering you?
I mean, it wasn't a secret. It was just that we had this built-in audience where, if you look at a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio, for every show we would do, you imagine that the classes of students, whether we were talking about like the CCIS schools or the public schools or whatever, we were likely to get 2 or 3 inquiries from parents that had not yet reached out to us for their kids' bar bat mitzvahs. So, at one point we were doing well over 200 or 250 bar bat mitzvahs per year. And when you look at the data, because we pulled the data from the Cleveland Jewish News, we absolutely had half or 3/4 of the market share.
I was going to say that's why it seemed like you're everywhere, because you were everywhere.
Yeah. At one point at the peak, but I also think that we were realistic enough as the cycle of what's hot and what's new. And, I was the young guy we were the young company, the new kids on the block. The marketing merry-go-round continues to turn, and everybody wants the new shiny thing as well. So we knew that was coming years before it actually happened.
Anybody who has a business or has been part of a fast-growing business, no, I'll just call it a fast business, a fast-growing business knows that, it's one thing at the start to get clients, start doubling your revenue. Like that's all super exciting and obviously great from a business sense. But at a certain point, and it sounds like your case pretty quickly, you need to make some changes to allow yourself to scale like that. And especially if you're someone like yourself who is hands-on and doing a lot of these events in person, there's literally a ceiling to how much you can grow until you expand your team. So what changes did you make in place? What were those pivot points? What were those inflection points where you made some changes to provide an opportunity to scale the business?
Yeah, whether you're a guy like me that at the time was DJing and emceeing, and at the same time wearing the hat of the visionary and the integrator, and training people up, and really guiding people, which is really my passion. And when I look back on it now, that is the reason that we were and are still successful, is because we guide and we're in the business, or I was in the business at the time, of growing people, not things. My whole thing was bringing, a small handful of bar and bat mitzvah age, young men and young women on board and teaching them a craft that stayed with them for life. And some of them are now partners and owners in the business, and that's really great. But the pivot points, as you put it, or what it took to continue, delegation, understanding that learning how to run the business in real time, really working on the plane while it's in the air. We were very good at that. We were good as a team for team decision-making and consensus building amongst the team. It was very rare that we would make a decision that wasn't unanimous once we discussed a thing. And it's just no different if I'm a DJ doing 100 events a year, which I was doing at my peak, and still wearing all those other hats. There are only so many hours in the day. But when you're young, you have those hours. That is, if you're not married yet, if you don't have the kids yet, if you don't have the other responsibilities yet, all those hours go right back into the business, just like money does for capital, and it pays dividends, at the end of the rainbow.
Now I have Wizard of Oz vibes, so thank you for that. But that delegation piece is so huge, and it's a very tough thing to do, especially at the start. but obviously you got in a rhythm with it. What do you think worked well for you as far as delegating? Like, why did that work out as opposed to, oh my God, now all of a sudden all these events are like crashing and burning?
Well, the delegation of the events itself, that's more like training and trust. What I'm talking about is that if in the back end of the business, we have now sales and we have accounting and we have to talk about production and pack lists and vehicle registrations and all these other things, learning to delegate early on was very difficult for me because I was fast and good at most of these things. So if you ask the team and the people that were with me from the beginning, I was not a good delegator early on, flat out, but I got better at it. And I think it was sort of like, if you look over the years, which way the wind was blowing, there are probably certain points in my career where I was better at delegating than others. But the other side of the events and, scaling to do 1,000 events a year, even if I'm, the only one doing 100 of them, that's really about training and trust and making sure that you have processes and procedures and systems and, quality control, all those things. That's not exactly the same thing as the delegation I was talking about.
Right. So there's two different ballparks there. Well, we'll imagine that Cleveland's a 2 ballpark city. So one of those, the back end of the business, what was your priority in terms of getting more help there?
Well, the reason that Business Handyman is so fitting, which is my, most recently created brand for how I brand the coaching I do, is that I'm pretty good at most disciplines of business. But along the way, I realized that I was best served to train and motivate and be the glue. So I'm the stereotypical visionary combination integrator role in a business. I knew very early on, as soon as I started to hire, admins and executive assistants, I knew that I didn't like busy work and repeatable things that didn't make my brain work. Reconciling, our finances, no, really not my bag. Prepping shows on a daily basis as my only role. Did I enjoy that? No, I didn't. But did I do it when we were busy? Absolutely. Up until 2006, 2007, every member of the team was unloading and loading trucks every week, until we scaled to the point where that wasn't a thing. But yeah, man, I was really just down with growing people, being the glue, having crazy ideas, and, basically keeping things together. Because we both know so many people whose businesses, within 1 or 2 years, they just explode, whether it's because of profitability or because of poor management. And thankfully, we were able to keep our arms around both of those things.
And I can only imagine, like, knowing you have an urgent client deadline or something with finances that you need to get figured out ASAP, and then, oh shit, we have to go load this truck. Like, I can't imagine doing those things at the same time. And it sounds like you did that for a long, long time.
Yes, we did. And we did it very well. We did it with a smile on our face because we were truly enjoying ourselves every day.
So what about this other ballpark, we'll call it the front end, the production side, the side that I experience as a consumer, but a guest at these parties? How did you instill like values or kind of a blueprint for other people on your growing team to go out and, pun intended, rock the house?
It's a lot now like taking analogies from Disney and realizing that what we were doing was we were teaching theater. So a combination of how it was that I was raised, and I just mean in a very respectful, professional manner, being able to interact with people in all levels of life. And then having to sort of bottle that up or can it, or really just build a process for somebody. So if I'm going to sit next to somebody that I'm training and try and explain all the things that we do as Rock the House, what makes us rock the house, and all the things that we don't do, the do's and the don'ts, or as Disney would say, or was it Saks Fifth Avenue, or, some people are like, we don't point. I think that's a Ritz-ism. All these little tiny things were just things that I passed on to each individual, and they became just sort of like rock the house law. Like, this is how we do business. And that got noticed because the items that we're talking about, it's like we were well dressed, we were on time. It might sound silly, but we returned phone calls.
How dare you?
I know, right? At the time, we were such trendsetters. But at the show, we were putting up larger sound systems and larger light shows than other people had ever seen at the time. As far as marketing prowess, we were really cutting edge. In 2001, I believe, was the first time we posted. But do you remember how we used to take pictures at every party and post them on the website?
Of course. Yeah, they're everywhere.
All right. So, that can't be understated. that the Rock the House Internet Photo Archive was 10 years ahead of anybody thinking that it was going to be okay in mass. It wasn't until about 2009, 2010 that other places, theme parks and the like, started posting pictures of people in mass doing events like that. And we caught a lot of flack on it. You can imagine it's a very professional world. Many people approached us about whether what we were doing at the time was ethical, legal, etc. But there was no case law at the time. And we basically just met with our multiple attorneys and decided that until something bad happened, it was very good for the business. So the exposure was worth it. But I mean, come on, think about at the time, there is no Facebook, there is no social media. This is the only place that the guests at our parties can go to see all the pictures. And every single one of our competitors jumped on the bandwagon 5 or 6 years later, which you're also aware of.
I was, you read my mind. I was thinking about that. Like this, I'm thinking back to like what age I was at the time and when Facebook came around, and all this stuff was before Facebook, like when it started really picking up. And I remember just the thrill of like going to one of these parties, and then I don't remember how long after it was. It wasn't too long after, but anybody who was at that party was so excited to check your site, check your photo site, and then go check out the photos after. And like nowadays, obviously, social media would have kind of completely transformed how that is, but no question that works so well from like the branding and word of mouth and exclusivity aspect of it.
Yeah, the service level guarantees were a big thing for us. We always had a money back guarantee. We started saying it out loud years later, but we always had that. But the idea that the photos that we took at the party were going to be posted by basically 9 a.m. the very next morning was a huge deal because, I don't know if you and your friends were like that, but you would essentially, I would hear that people would wake up from a great party and then maybe they had a sleepover or whatever, and then they would all go online to see the pictures.
Yeah, I remember it being a big deal to check out these pictures. Yeah, I'm excited. Like, I want to go back and look at the ones I was in, but I'd probably be embarrassed by my puberty stage.
Most of them are still there, right? So if you go onto the photo archive, we've made some changes due to some security reasons and requests over the years, but most pictures from 2003 forward, because we had a server failure a long time ago. But they're still there, man. They're still there, and they still get a decent amount of traffic, which is very strange to me.
So you mentioned server failure. Besides that, what would you say is maybe the biggest failure you came across as a business owner?
The biggest failure that has happened as a company would be us taking our eye off the ball as emerging markets really started to take off. Rock the House was doing, as of 2019, only about 20% entertainment and 80% production and rentals and other type things. So one of the things that I would say I would do differently, it's not a regret because what we've done and what I do makes up who I am. So I don't have a lot of regrets in life, but failure for what it is we took our eye off the ball for how important social and social entertainment and the quality of social entertainment was going to be, because we thought that it was a failing secondary market for us. And it wasn't until we realized how stable that it was years later that we decided to sort of turn back and pump some more energy back into it. But a lot of people say you only get one shot at a first impression. That's very true. It's very hard to rebuild what's happening if you're no longer the top requested bar and bat mitzvah company. How do you get slot number one again? How do you do that? From that point in time, we just got more into just using our brains more and more, better marketing, better conversion rates, and then basically fill in all those shows that we were booking with the proper talent now for what it took. So I would say, yeah, that was a pretty big failure for us taking our eye off the ball.
Yeah. You really dropped the ball over the place. You never really had any success as a company. No, but I appreciate it. That's a really good lesson. Going back to that 7-year-old kid that first got onto the DJ scene. Now I'm thinking of like a young Tiesto or Steve Aoki or something like that. But as that 7-year-old kid, what do you think that kid would think now, looking at what you've done in your career and all the things that you've built and celebrated with people at Rock the House?
I think if that kid got a glimpse of what was to come within the next 35 or 40 years, I think that kid's head would explode. Because that kid never wanted to be a DJ. That kid, even up till me doing some interviews when I was 12 or 13 that are on YouTube and stuff with like Connie Deacon, Channel 3. I never wanted to be a DJ. I wanted to be a teacher and do other things. But I think that if I was sitting next to that 7-year-old, I think that he might go, wow, that's pretty cool. And that looks fun. And, but yeah, I think that my head would explode.
Shout out for any Big Mouth fans out there. The head explosion from Big Mouth. That's a very common occurrence. So Rock the House is obviously a story in itself. Now you've changed your role a little bit. You've technically given up majority of the company. I know you're still involved. You've evolved into more of a business coaching business, and you are the Business Handyman. I love that name. And it feels like you're starting to move into this chapter of your life where you're focused on giving back and advising and helping out other business owners and kind of helping them get to the next level. So where did this change come from?
Well, my role has changed a lot, a bit, not a little bit. So I think, Max, when you and I first started talking, it was pre-COVID and pre-first share transition. So
I'm sure I inspired everything by my emails. You're like, wow, I really got to switch things up before Max and I talk.
That's right. That's right. I said, man, I need some new material to jump on this. But it went from me being the 100% shareholder with phantom stock partners, as I'll put it, where Ryan Konikoff gained majority control of the business, but I was still CEO for a determined number of years. And then COVID hit and everything changed. And through lots of discussion and strategy and other items, we decided that I was going to step down. Essentially, we were going to take a beat, take a breath, and then decide what was going to happen. And after that happened, and we realized that the business was stable, he was doing well, and all of our needs were being met all the way around. The company and the partners bought the rest of my shares out. So I'm essentially now an advisor, and Rock the House is one of my clients, is the best way to put it.
That's really cool, though. Crazy to start something and then now be on the other side of it.
Yeah. I get asked most often on podcasts like this and interviews, whether I have regret or how did I give up my baby? And I just want to address it. I never really had any regret about anything other than my relationship with my friends, because my friends were by my side the entire time. I very rarely use the word I or me or my, unless it's the only word fitting for a sentence. But I'm all about we, us, and our. We were together the entire time, made all those decisions together. It wasn't Matt Radicelli and then it is Married Band of Men. That's why my name was never on the sign. It was Rock the House, right? So
right. You could have been like Rock the Matt or Rock the Radicelli. That would have been something.
Totally. But everything was about the we. It was about the team. So when the share sale happened, and imagine I was 7 years old. I'm in this industry for 25 years. I've essentially lived an entire life and career doing a thing. I was at a certain point relieved, sort of got the payday, got the exit, this, that, and the other. And the only thing that I've ever really been frustrated or regretful about is that it changed our personal relationships a bit, because it added a little, like another layer of business to it. And a lot of people say partnerships are rough. I agree. The fundamentals and mechanics of a partnership are sometimes very challenging. But yeah, I'm out. So this business coach thing, I was business coaching from the time that my kids were in preschool and then they were home. I used to take Wednesdays off because I would rock parties on Fridays and Saturdays. So Wednesday would be like my Saturday. I would take the day off.
Also, so you could listen to the new Wild Business Growth podcast episode. I'm sure that was the motivation.
That is correct. But since it didn't exist 15 years ago,
I should have started this earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. That's how I feel about my cryptocurrency mining business. The Wednesdays, I started taking the day off to spend the time with the kids and my wife. So we would just, do stuff. We'd go to the zoo, we'd go to the park and blah, blah, blah. And then the kids got old enough to go to school. And then I started being asked to speak at national conventions. And then I would, have a situation where somebody would say, hey, I need some help or some advice. Would you be willing to coach me? And I hired a business coach, and it was an amazing experience. My first business coach, his name was Wayne Bergman. And he was with Action Coach at the time. The relationship was so good that I saw the framework and said, I could do this. I could duplicate what I just had happen and, share my story, share my knowledge, and help other people. And from the time that happened when my kids were in school until, the time that I sold the first half of Rock the House, I was managing 4 clients in a rotation at all times. So I was basically like 25 or 30% of my annual revenue personally was coming from coaching and consulting. And it came very naturally and I loved it. So after the Rock the House transition happened, I took some time. But I decided to take on more clients. Right now I have 9. My schedule can fit 12 very, very easily. I have 9 coaching clients that I meet with weekly for 1 hour Zoom, tons of resources, tons of assistance. And I'm that shot of B12 that they need, the cheerleader and the advisor, in all the different facets of business. But that's where it started. And that's where it's taken me so far.
Clearly there's a lot your clients get out of it. What do you get out of this personally?
That is an awesome question. And thank you for asking it.
No problem.
I get the feedback and I get to watch somebody get it when you see it in their eyes that they've just learned a concept that they think is going to be a game changer if they implement it properly. I also learn in real time whether the things that we're talking about are effective and how it is that I can help myself or other clients with that information. I just get so much pleasure. And, if we talk about purpose, purpose is one of the words that gets used a lot if you're going to read books about the next chapter of life or what's next or, blah, blah, blah. That's the closest thing that I could tell you hits to 100% of my purpose of anything else in life right now, is that moment where I can teach somebody or pass on knowledge or help them. Because you probably, not a lot of people know the difference. So I don't want to make an assumption between a coach and a consultant. I like being a coach better than a consultant. A coach will ask you the right questions, lead you to water, encourage you to make your own decisions, and then celebrate your successes and your failures in real time. So what I do is I posture myself as a coach and a consultant. I want to be a coach most of the time. But if you're having that day or that one thing where you just come to me and say, Matt, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to have talk therapy. Just tell me what to do. I will consult. I'll say, if I were you, based on what I know, I would do this, this, and this. Go. I've been told that makes my positioning very unique because many coaches won't do that. They'll say, I'm not your advisor. I won't tell you what to do. Well, I'll just warn you. It's your decision ultimately, but I like to avoid advice at all costs. I like to learn, but good question though. Really good question.
No problem. Every now and then one slips in. I don't know how it happens, but it does. But coach versus consultant, there's a different feel. Like coach kind of just has an overall warmer feel to it. And you think of, obviously, coach ties back very well to sports, and anybody that's had a good or great coach in their life knows that they can help you get the best out of yourself. So I really like how you're approaching things that way, coaching things that way. When you look at your current clients as well as people you may coach in the future, are there certain industries or segments that you're really excited about and it's kind of like your ideal business coaching space?
It's interesting because clients that are in the entertainment and production space are the easiest to close, the easiest to connect with, probably the fastest to scale and to make major headway in. But the ones I seem to enjoy the most are service-based businesses that are not in that space, because for me, it's a bit of a challenge as well, right? So I don't think that the concepts that exist within the production or entertainment space are unique in any way. A lot of my philosophies about business is that nothing is new, and marketing is a great showing of that. It's really just a different packaging of the same information done differently and done better than it was previously. And, right now I'm 2/3 production entertainment companies and 1/3 non-production entertainment. And I have to say, some days, most days, I enjoy those other sessions because they're more challenging for me and sometimes more fulfilling. But I probably have more to offer, I guess is what I'm saying, in the production entertainment space, because if somebody asks me a direct question about how it is that we're going to train up enough staff members to, fill an oversold date in October, or what it is that we did in order to overcome inefficiencies for truck packs specific to, DJs or corporate audiovisual, I can answer those questions from firsthand experience.
There's fun in variety and there's fun in mixing things up. I think, especially with your background of doing events and like a specific type of thing for so many years, it's got to feel so good to mix it up at least a little bit.
Yeah, I wish I had your gift of being able to condense words. I should have just said there's fun in variety. I should have just said that.
No. We're here to hear you. So if you want to spell out the word variety, that's totally up to you. The other thing with your coaching business, I love how you're saying the business handyman, like this handyman identity, not just handyman, but business handyman identity. It has wonderful imagery with it. and I'm going to spell it imagery. No, I'm just kidding. But how did you come up with this? Or how are you deemed the business handyman?
Right when COVID first started, and we were in the midst of watching our cash flow forecast at Rock the House. And remember, I'm at this point, I'm still CEO. I'm 50% partner, a little less than 50%. We sort of all went into hibernation, actively managing the business, but there was no business. It was COVID. So like there were no weddings, there were no bar mitzvahs, there were no corporate events. I started working with my hands and building. So like my studio that I'm in right now in my house, it's a sort of like a pseudo kitchenette with studio lighting and a whiteboard and a giant programming console, and it's got some turntables in it. But I built it all, with the exception of doing some drywall and some electrical work in here. I did it all myself, and I was just doing a bunch of handyman type stuff. And then my wife and I bought a photography studio for her. She's been doing photography for almost 2 decades now, but we bought a studio in Twinsburg and retrofitted it. And we were, again, very active in the retrofit of that building. So I was sort of exploring who I was after the second part of the sale with Rock the House. And I just sort of stumbled on the idea that I like being known as a handyman, because people were surprised that I could do this thing, like that I could take wood and build a door from scratch and have it be beautiful, or, build a custom cabinet, because, nobody knew I could do that. And I think that's how business is a lot for me. When somebody meets me, there's usually some context about how they met me and what they're asking me. So if I enter a conversation right now let's say I'm introduced from one crypto miner to another, and they learn that I mine Ethereum and then I build these servers and whatnot, that person has no idea that I have 25 years of marketing, branding, business acumen, and all those other things. So the business handyman persona was basically me saying, if you have 8 groups of people sitting in conference rooms behind 8 different doors, I can walk into every one of those rooms with them talking about different things in different disciplines of business and bring value to that table. I have that skill. I'm not cocky about it. I don't think that I'm an expert in many of them, but I believe that I bring value, and that makes me a very unique coach.
Yeah, it's that variety. The handyman, you have so many different tools and tool sets that you can tap into. So I appreciate it. I'm all for metaphors. So it just struck a chord with me, to use a metaphor, I guess.
Thank you.
Ready for another metaphor? Podcasting will turn your business from standard definition to 4K Ultra HD surround sound, speakers bumping through the floor and ceiling. That's exactly how it works. Definition. Podcasting is something that can truly add another dimension to your business, whether it's interviewing experts in your industry, whatever services you offer, networking with other big players, and of course, creating true, genuine relationships with those who may become customers one day, or maybe they're just those people who just like to hear you talk. Any way you slice it, podcasting can be a help for your business and can add a little spice to your business. There's probably a better metaphor. If you're interested in adding a high-quality podcast to your business without you shouldering all that load of the time commitment, hit me up at max@maxpodcasting.com. That's max@maxpodcasting.com. Until next time, see, almost got you there. Now, back to getting rad with Radicelli. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shoutout of the Week.
The Wild Business Shoutout of the Week!
Wild Business Shoutout of the Week is where we talk about a creative ad, marketing, something that just broke through, caught our attention. And it's not the first time this has happened, but Ryan Reynolds, his team, I believe the company's called Maximum Effort, basically the infamous now, or famous, Peloton rebuttal ad from the whole Sex and the City debacle. Can you share why that jumps out to you and why you think it's creating so many headlines?
Without a doubt, my favorite piece, as you talked about, is the unspoiler alert, the Peloton ad. Chris Noth and Ryan Reynolds, to be in an ad that comes out less than 2 days after the most controversial TV death I think that's ever happened, and to see Peloton stock plummet for what was happening, I just looked at it and went, whoa, fuck yeah, this is genius. And whether they actually came out with it in 48 hours or not, I don't care. I think it's great fodder for it. But, I was impressed. I laughed. I mean, and who can't be proud of and impressed by anything that's voiced by Ryan Reynolds? It's hilarious.
Exactly when he's speaking so quick like this, I know he's alive. But what do you think works so well for that?
I just think that they took a chance. I think that it was all very well calculated for what was happening. So for me to play that game of chess in my head while I'm watching this ad makes it even better for me to realize that I don't think that this was an accident, to use the term. So I think that everybody knew it was coming. I think the only thing that they didn't know was that I don't think that they knew that their stock was going to go down because of it. And, in theater and in production, suspension of disbelief can have very good outcomes and it can have very bad outcomes. And in this case, it just wasn't good for Peloton temporarily. But history will be the judge of that. As professional marketers, let's see. I mean, if you zoom out, there's a real good chance that Peloton bounces back and is better for it because of how much PR they got from it. But speaking of PR, I was having a conversation with another marketing friend of mine, and they basically said, do you think that there's any chance that anybody knew about the Chris Noth, controversy since that ad, since we're talking about, has been pulled? It is no longer in generalized media. If you Google it, you can't find it other than like Whoopi Goldberg talking about it on The View because of some allegations about Chris Noth. So, there are some questions about whether even things like that are teed up and are expected for controversy, because we're still talking about it. You and I are talking about it right now.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy these days. To spoil the finish here, let's maybe get to some rapid fire Q&A next. You ready for it?
Let's go.
All right, let's get wild. Just as a pure fan, who is your biggest DJ influence of all time?
Mixmaster Mike.
Back when you were doing these live shows, what's the song that just always seemed to, besides the horror, I won't let you say that one. Besides the horror, what's the song that always got people going the most?
Yeah, well, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to say that things like the electric slide and, cha-cha slide and all that other line dance stuff, it just, unfortunately, it just gave the old people a chance to get closer and participate. So that's
Cupid Shuffle, shout it out. Yeah,
exactly. In terms of like, man, my favorite song that brought together at the time back in the day, and I'm actually going to go back to before Bar Mitzvahs, would have been Like a Prayer by Madonna.
Oh, interesting. I did not expect that.
I know it's great, but if I had the right sound system, the right light show, and the right crowd, that's a song where I could get an entire building shaking with people jumping.
I have some serious retro vibes now, maybe retro vibes as well. And then what is, in addition to your DJ and production and in business and business coaching skill set, what would you say is a hidden talent, a weird talent that you have, something that you're really good at, but it doesn't really impact your day to day? It's just, hey, I have a knack for, like saying the alphabet backwards or something like that.
Yeah. Not many people know that I took tap, jazz, and ballet for 8 years as a kid. And then I've been in theater a lot. So like a few years ago, I actually was in a production of Willy Wonka with my family, and I went out for it and I got the lead for Willy Wonka. So I'm singing and dancing on stage with my kids, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, performance is the hidden talent. And I mean specifically the singing and dancing.
Oh my God, that's amazing. You're an amazing gobstopper, you. And then you mentioned how many trucks you've loaded and unloaded and prepped for shows over the years. What's your tip for like doing something like that that's extremely high labor and like lifting all this heavy equipment?
Never stop. The thing is that I was in high school, I was able to deadlift insane amounts of weight because I was always slinging speakers around, and I was always doing it properly and never hurt myself. But the moment that I reached mid-20s, early 30s, mid-30s, when I started to sort of decline the number of shows and the amount of loading I was doing myself, mostly because I was spending more time with my family. I would basically show up to a show that was already set up or leave, and then pay somebody else to do it, to buy part of my life back. The moment you stop doing as much as you were before, your body starts to to let go. So I probably would have kept doing it more and more and more, just as much to stay strong.
Well, Matt, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing the Rock the House story, your Business Handyman story. Just so many great times and so much awesome. That didn't even sound right. So much awesome, but we'll roll with it. So much awesome advice and insight. Really appreciate you coming on. Where's the best place for people to learn more about Rock the House and learn more about your coaching business?
It's pretty easy to find me. MattRadicelli.com gets you directly connected, and that'll spider you off to the Facebook, the Instagram, all that jazz. Just note, I'm reachable. I'm relatable. I'm human. I'm here, and I return emails and phone calls. So anybody that ever wants to chat, just give me a shout.
Perfect. And then we'll spider out everywhere. But last thing, final thoughts. It could be a quote, just words to live by, whatever you want. Just send us home here.
I think it's best in life to build people, not things.
Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your amazing Rock the House story and beyond. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to check out the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the podcast. You can also find us on Good Pods. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at MaxPodcasting.com. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!